Hello everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. In today's video, we're diving into a powerful story about Diep, a young woman who spent her whole life believing her parents had died, only to discover that they are still alive. After years of pain, doubt, and unanswered questions, she makes the life-changing decision to find them and demand the truth. Will this journey bring healing, or will it open even deeper wounds? Stay tuned, and if you enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Diep has carried the weight of abandonment for 25 years, convinced her parents had died. But when she learns they are alive, her world shatters and rebuilds in an instant. Though the truth is painful, Diep decides she can no longer live in shadows and sets out on a journey to find them. Accompanied by James, who stays by her side through storms and doubts, Diep pushes past fear and fragile hope. Along the way, she discovers resilience within herself, the strength to face the parents who once left her behind. When she finally arrives at their doorstep, she trembles between longing and dread, ready to confront the truth. Whether her parents embrace her or reject her again, Diep knows she has chosen courage over silence, beginning a new chapter of her life. Rain lashes against the windows, splitting the night apart with its fury. Inside her restless dream, Diep drifts through a bleak landscape, shadows stretching endlessly before her. She sees her parents, faint figures outlined against the storm. Her voice cracks as she calls out, "Why did you leave me? For 25 years I searched for you, and all I found was emptiness. Am I not your child anymore?" Her arms reach forward, desperate to pull them close, but her hands clutch only air. The images dissolve, slipping away like smoke. The rain in her dream collides with the tears streaming down her face, each drop weighted with the grief of abandonment. She cries out, "Don't turn away! Don't leave me again!" But her parents vanish into a void darker than the storm itself. Diep jolts awake, her breathing sharp, the room pressing down like a coffin. A pale glow from a distant streetlight slips through the curtains, spilling across her drawn features. Her eyes, swollen from nights of tears, flicker with despair. Wrapping her arms around herself, she rocks gently, as if she could soothe away the ache in her chest. 25 years of silence. 25 years of questions without answers. Did her parents' love simply fade away? Or had she never truly mattered to them? The thought claws at her, sharper than any blade. Outside, the rain continues its merciless assault, striking the earth like hammers against steel. To Diep, every patter against the roof feels like a cruel reminder that the world refuses to grant her peace. She whispers into the stillness, her voice fragile. If this was just a dream, why does it feel so real? The only reply is the relentless rain, an unending chorus that echoes her isolation. It becomes a mournful melody, weaving itself into her veins, chaining her to despair. The boundary between hope and hopelessness blurs, trapping her in a place where sorrow is the only constant. The storm outside softens to a drizzle. On the edge of a nearby construction site, mud slickens the earth, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked soil. Under dim lamps, two workers strain to push a cart loaded with iron rods. "Easy, easy," one calls, panic in his tone as the cart threatens to tip. They cling to each other for balance, their muscles trembling under the weight. The clatter of metal vibrates through the air, and for a split second, disaster looms. "Steady! It's heavy! Don't lose it!" the other worker urges, his eyes locked on the shifting cargo. Every step across the sodden ground feels like a gamble with fate, yet they move with rhythm, deliberate and synchronized, as though performing a dangerous dance choreographed by necessity. When at last the cart reaches safety inside the workshop, one of them exhales in relief, murmuring, "It's done." A faint smile breaks across their weary faces, but vigilance lingers in their eyes. Their clothes cling damply to their skin, chilled by the storm, yet the victory fills them with quiet warmth. For them, this moment is not just about securing the materials. It is about conquering fear. The site still hums with unease, the tin roof above echoing the persistent tapping of rain. Their calloused hands, etched with scars of labor, glisten under the dim light. In this fleeting moment, they are bound together by shared struggle, standing strong against the fragile world around them. The storm offers no kindness, only its unyielding rhythm. But within its chaos, they carve out resilience. As the rain continues, a narrow village road winds toward a red-bricked house. Diep trudges through the mud, her clothes soaked, her heart heavy. She pauses before the wooden door, her chest tightening with every breath. With trembling hands, she knocks. Her uncle appears, his expression shadowed by unease. Diep's voice quivers as she asks, "Uncle, tell me the truth. Are my parents still alive?" The old man lowers his gaze, his voice burdened with sorrow. "Child, they've been gone for a long time. You must let them go." But Diep refuses to accept the lie. Her voice hardens, desperation flaring. "No, someone told me they're alive. What are you hiding from me?" The storm outside rumbles, as though demanding truth itself. Her uncle shakes his head, firm, but the words cut deep into her soul. Tears stream down Diep's cheeks, mixing with the rain that slips through the open doorway. Her voice breaks, rising into a scream. "They are alive, but they abandoned me." The storm's roar crescendos, echoing her anguish. Her body staggers, her mind spinning wildly. The floor rushes up to meet her as she collapses, her strength consumed by grief. Her uncle freezes, his eyes wide with regret. He kneels beside her, but cannot find words. The storm drowns out everything, its cry resembling a funeral hymn for the child left behind. In the haze of unconsciousness, Diep drifts again into the dreamscape of her parents turning their backs. This time, the truth pierces deeper. They had lived, yet chosen silence. It feels like a betrayal sharper than death. The storm outside howls, relentless, a mirror to her broken heart. Each raindrop becomes a verdict, each clap of thunder a reminder of her solitude. The house around her seems to shrink, its walls pressing in as she lies motionless on the cold floor. Her uncle sits in silence, regret etched on his weathered face, unable to ease the wound he helped deepen. The rain fills the silence, weaving its mournful chant across the night, sealing her pain in an unyielding refrain. Far from the village, the floodwaters rise, streets turning into shallow rivers. James pushes against the current, finally reaching the small house. Inside, Diep lies unconscious on the bed, her face pale, her breath shallow. He rushes to her side, grasping her cold hand. "Diep," he whispers, his voice trembling. Why didn't you listen to me? I begged you to rest. His chest aches with guilt, his eyes burning with fear. The storm outside rages, but James's world narrows to this fragile figure before him. He blames himself. Had he stopped her from chasing the truth, maybe she wouldn't have suffered this way. His voice cracks as he murmurs, maybe it would have been better if you never knew. But deep inside, he knows this is her path. The wound of abandonment is hers to bear, and he cannot erase it. He thinks of his own family, complete and warm, and realizes he cannot truly comprehend her torment. As he watches her, her closed eyes flutter with the remnants of her nightmare. James grips her hand tighter, wishing he could shield her from the storm raging in her soul. Yet the distance between them feels as vast as the flood outside. The rushing water echoes her faint, steady heartbeat, reminding him she still fights. James remains by her side, shoulders heavy with helplessness. The storm's roar mocks his powerlessness, hammering against the fragile walls of the house. Under the dim glow of a lantern, Diep's face is a portrait of loss. James is close enough to touch, but still feels like an outsider, unable to bridge the chasm carved by years of pain. The rain does not let up. Every drop seals her solitude. Every clap of thunder deepens his despair. And as the storm surges on, they are both stranded. Diep in her world of betrayal, James in his helpless longing, tied together beneath an unforgiving sky. The storm slowly weakens, though the clouds still loom heavy. Dawn spills a pale light across the village, revealing streets washed clean, yet scarred with mud. Inside the small room, Diep stirs, her eyelashes fluttering as she drifts between nightmare and waking. Her body feels weightless, as though the night has drained every ounce of strength. James, still at her side, hasn't moved since the storm began. His eyes are tired, but when he notices her stirring, hope flickers in his chest. He leans closer, whispering, "Diep, can you hear me?" Her eyes open slightly, filled with a haunting mixture of sorrow and clarity. She doesn't look at him right away. Instead, her gaze drifts to the window, where the rain still trickles down the glass. After a long silence, her voice rasps, "They're alive, James. My parents, they're alive." He tightens his grip on her hand, uncertain of how to respond. For so long, she insisted they were gone. And now, faced with the truth, he can see her struggling to accept it. Diep exhales shakily. All those years, I thought they were dead. I hated myself for surviving without them, but now I know they chose to leave me behind. Her words slice through the room, heavy with bitterness and grief. James searches for the right words, but finds none. Instead, he listens, his silence offering space for her to release the storm she has carried inside. Finally, Diep pushes herself upright, though her body trembles with weakness. She wipes her tears roughly, determination glinting beneath the pain. I can't stay like this anymore, trapped in questions and half-truths. I need to find them. I need to see them face to face. James's brows furrow. Diep, are you sure? After everything, after they abandoned you, do you really want to chase them? Her answer comes without hesitation. Yes, if they left me, I want to hear them say it. If they regret it, I want to see it in their eyes, and if they've forgotten me, then at least I'll know the truth. I can't keep living in this fog of doubt." The firmness in her voice startles him. For the first time, he sees not only her pain, but also her strength rising through it. She has endured abandonment, but she refuses to let it define the rest of her life. The day stretches on. The storm clears, leaving the earth soaked and the air thick with the scent of renewal. Diep, though still weak, begins preparing for the journey. She folds a few clothes, slips them into a small bag, and looks at James. "You don't have to come with me. This is my fight." But James shakes his head firmly. "You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, I'll be by your side." They set out together, walking along muddy roads where puddles reflect the clearing sky. Each step feels heavier for Diep, weighed down by years of memories. Yet within her chest, a quiet fire burns, the fire of seeking, of refusing to let her life remain buried in unanswered questions. Along the way, they stop at a roadside tea stall. The owner, an elderly woman, greets them warmly, her voice carrying the wisdom of years. She notices the exhaustion in Diep's eyes and gently sets a steaming cup before her. "Whatever you're searching for, child," the woman says softly, "remember that sometimes the journey itself brings the answers." Diep bows her head, absorbing the words. She sips the tea, its warmth anchoring her for the path ahead. James watches her, admiring her resolve, even as he worries about what she might find. As evening falls, they reach a small town where rumors swirl more vividly than facts. Diep visits an old neighbor who once worked alongside her parents in the city. The neighbor hesitates before speaking, torn between loyalty and pity. Finally, she admits, "Yes, your parents are alive. They went to the city years ago, chasing a better life. I heard they've built something there. Work, perhaps even a family." The words hit Diep like a tidal wave. Alive, building a new life, perhaps even another family. Her knees weaken, but she steadies herself. She whispers, almost to herself, "So it's true. They chose the city over me." James places a hand on her shoulder, steady and grounding. "Diep, hearing it from others isn't enough. If you want the truth, you'll have to hear it from them." And so, their path bends toward the city. The city greets them with chaos. Bright lights, crowded streets, the hum of engines, and the relentless rush of people chasing their lives. Diep feels small within it, but her heart pounds with determination. Somewhere within this maze, her parents live and breathe. Days pass as they search. They ask questions, follow fragments of rumors, trace addresses half remembered by those who once knew them. Each dead end chips away at her strength, but she presses forward, unwilling to let despair win again. One evening, after hours of searching, they find themselves in front of a modest but well-kept house. Its walls are freshly painted, its windows glowing with warm light. Inside, laughter drifts out, a sound of family gathered around a meal. Diep freezes, her breath caught in her throat. She doesn't need anyone to confirm. It is them. The house radiates a life built without her. Her hands tremble violently. She takes a step forward, then stops, torn between desire and dread. James watches, sensing the storm raging inside her. "Diep, You don't have to do this tonight. We can wait. But she shakes her head. Her voice is faint but resolute. No, I've waited long enough. She approaches the gate, her footsteps hesitant, her heart a drumbeat of fear and longing. At the door, she raises her hand, poised to knock. But for a long moment, she cannot bring herself to touch the wood. Memories flood her. Nights alone. Dreams of parents who never came back. The weight of abandonment pressing down. Finally, with trembling fingers, she knocks. The door opens slowly, revealing a woman with streaks of gray in her hair, her eyes widening in shock. Behind her, a man approaches, his steps faltering as he takes in the sight before him. Diep's lips quiver. Her voice cracks as she whispers, "Mother, Father." The air thickens with silence. Her parents stand frozen, the past rushing back into the present with unforgiving force. For Diep, the journey has only just begun. The answers she longed for now lie within reach. Yet whether they will heal her wounds or deepen them remains unknown. What matters most is this: she has chosen not to run from the truth anymore. James stands a few steps behind her, watching with quiet resolve. He knows this moment will shape her forever. The storm that once trapped her in despair has now carried her here, to the threshold of truth, where the possibility of reconciliation or heartbreak waits. The night air is still, as if the world itself holds its breath. Diep's heart pounds, her entire being braced for the words that will either mend or shatter her. Yet for the first time, she feels alive in her pursuit, no longer a prisoner of uncertainty. And as she faces the parents who abandoned her, she knows she is ready, not just to hear the truth, but to claim her own path forward, no matter what it holds.